from London. We're looking at
top advisors on the way.
The briefing room door at the White House. That's President Bush. You're looking at a live picture this morning. See if we can hear this conversation.
All right, good morning. Thanks for stopping in. Harry, you with me here?
That's Wyatt Andrews, I think, who was chatting with the president.
Seems to be a private conversation there. Good morning, Wyatt.
Good morning, Paula. Good morning, Harry. As we stood here on standby waiting for you to come here, the president himself popped into the briefing room. He said that he had just been in the Oval Office and was just stopping by here to see how things were going. He said that from his point of view, things were going well. He says that he has been watching television, and he says things are going exactly as you all have been reporting. And by that, I took that to mean that, militarily the operations have been going well, and also that he has been in the mansion throughout most of the night receiving updates. He said that this is not unusual for him to be up at this time, but that he just decided to come over here to the West Wing, and that he is expecting a meeting of his top advisors here at the White House within the next couple of hours. Otherwise, Paula and Harry, we expect the look of the White House to be as normal as possible today, despite the fact, of course, that it's anything but. It's also obvious that the White House has a series of consultations that it must maintain. There were complaints early last night from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Perez de Cuellar, that he had not been consulted in advance. And of course, that will be a concern here because this all along is a UN operation. Whatever the United States is doing is under the umbrella of United Nations sanctions. I'm sure there'll be some work done on that. Congress also will have a wealth of questions, and if the administration's behavior in Panama is any guide, it's likely that administration officials will fan out to Congress today to answer the wealth of questions there. Congressional reaction so far, predictably, has overwhelmingly been to stop any divisive debate, close ranks around the troops, although we must say it's early yet. One thing we learned last night from presidential spokesman Marlin Fitzwater that is politically important, and that we did not know before the onset of these operations, is that the president plans not to go to Congress to ask for a formal declaration of war, that he will stand pat with the authority granted him by the congressional vote over the weekend. The White House was unwilling to say before the onset of the hostilities whether it would go to Congress and formally ask for a declaration of war, and now they have said they will not seek that. Paula, Harry?
Wyatt, are we likely to hear from the president at a news conference later on today?
There's no telling, and I did not get a chance to ask the president what his plan is on that. Again, our only guide on matters like that is the Panama situation, where the president kept his counsel through the first day. He spoke to the American people through speeches, not through press conferences, and if I'm not mistaken, I may be, but if I'm not mistaken, a full formal press conference came the second day.
All right. Thank you very much, Wyatt Andrews, reporting from Washington after a very short and private conversation with the president there. As
we got a little bit of a...
coincidentally stuck his head out into the briefing room door there.
A little glimpse of that. We want to go to Tel Aviv this morning, where Dr. Dori Gold, who is the director of U.S. Foreign and Defense Policy Project at the Jaffe Center for Strategic Studies, also the author of the 1986 book, America, the Gulf, and Israel, is standing by. Dr. Gold, can you hear me all right?
I hear you fine.
What is the mood there this morning, and how are you looking at the last dozen hours or so? There was certainly a considerable threat from Saddam Hussein to Israel. He made it quite clear that if, in fact, a war started, he would attack Israel. From all indications and from what we hear of the success of the U.S. raid into Baghdad, into Iraq last night, might you guess that the Allies were successful in knocking out that which was most threatening to Israel?
Well, I would describe Israel's condition today as one of guarded relief. Guarded relief because I think that it's very likely that the main fixed missile sites, the Al Hussein missile sites that are located or were located at the H-2 and H-3 air bases in the western Iraqi panhandle, those fixed missile sites were probably destroyed by the Allied air forces last night. However, there's also concern still here in Israel that Iraq has a considerable number of mobile missile launchers. And it stands to reason that Saddam Hussein, expecting a large American airstrike, would have put those mobile missile launchers in protected hangars, heavily protected by reinforced concrete. And therefore, we're not out of the woods yet with the Iraqi threat. People in Israel are today under a much higher level of civil defense alert. They take their gas masks with them if they go out at all. They've been told by civil defense authorities to stay at home, stay inside, and open their sealed gas masks and have them ready. So again, there's relief, but it's a guarded relief.
But isn't the primary threat, or wasn't the primary threat to those missiles that you talked about just a second ago, that those missiles were in fact the ones that had the distance, had the capability of getting all the way from Iraq to Israel?
Well, those of us who followed the Iraqi military over the last number of years noted that at the tail end of the Iran-Iraq war, the Iraqis managed to take a Soviet Scud missile, which has about a 280-kilometer range, and extend the range out to 650 kilometers, and thereby they were able to strike Tehran repeatedly with missile strikes. Now, it's about the same range if you shift eastward, now westward towards Tel Aviv, and therefore those Al-Hussein missiles were presumably able to hit Tel Aviv.
Okay.
Now, there was a debate in the intelligence community here whether the Iraqis had chemical warheads or not. Israel assumed the worst and prepared for a chemical missile strike on its main cities.
Dr. Gold, thank you so much for joining us.
And for those of you that just might be joining us now, our CBS News coverage of the Persian Gulf conflict continues, and here are the headlines at this time of the morning. BBC Radio has the first report of some Allied casualties, but there are no details so far. Iraqi forces in Kuwait are reported shelling U.S. and Allied forces. The massive Allied airstrikes are continuing against targets both in Kuwait and Iraq, but Saddam Hussein, we're told, remains defiant. Baghdad Radio claims that Iraqi forces have shot down 14 Allied warplanes, but those reports are unconfirmed at this time. Also, the BBC quotes an Allied commander in Bahrain as saying there have been some Allied casualties. He refused, though, to give any details. There is one report of an exchange of artillery fire across the Kuwaiti border between U.S. and Iraqi forces. World leaders are lining up behind George Bush. Mikhail Gorbachev addressed his nation a short time ago, blaming Saddam Hussein for the war. And in London, British Prime Minister John Major also spoke out.
I, of course, have known about the timing of the attack, as I said a few moments ago, from the consultations I had with President Bush at the conclusion of the House of Commons debate on Tuesday. I therefore was aware of the time the attack would take place.
But voices for war are being met by pleas for peace and demonstrations against the war all across the nation. I thought it might be interesting to share with you now some of the editorials that we're beginning to see this morning, if you haven't had a chance to pick up your newspaper and sort of get a sense of how people are viewing this all over the country. From the New York Times this morning, on the op-ed page, it says as follows: he could not have missed or misunderstood the messages that the rest of the world has sent him repeatedly since his troops devoured Kuwait last August. He surely cannot have missed the message delivered last night by the waves of bombers and missiles. It is a powerful message on behalf of honorable goals. Another one that might be interesting to know comes from the Arizona Republic this morning. And it says, however critically one may view the administration's diplomatic efforts, this nation is at war again. And however skeptical this newspaper may have been toward the policies leading up to war in the first place, the efforts of American men and women in the Gulf will have our full and unquestioned support.
We want to check in with correspondent Anthony Mason right now, who is in Moscow. President Gorbachev there delivered an address to the Soviet people, a prepared address, a pre-taped address, and Anthony has been monitoring that. Tell us what it's all about.
Good morning, Harry. President Gorbachev spoke to the nation a little over an hour ago, about 12:30 in the afternoon local time. It was, as you say, pre-taped in his office in the Kremlin. He said that the Soviet Union had done its best to solve the conflict through peaceful measures. He was informed, he said, by Secretary of State James Baker about an hour before the conflict began, and that he immediately contacted President Bush and asked for one last chance through direct channels to contact Saddam Hussein and ask him to pull out. Reluctantly, regrettably, he said, to our great regret, we could not avoid conflict. There are still some 130 Soviets in Iraq. President Gorbachev said in his speech that as far as he knew, there were no casualties to Soviet citizens. There are Soviet forces in the south of the country, it was announced by the Defense Department here this morning, have been put on high alert. As for reports, the newspapers this morning carried no information about the attack because it occurred about 2:30 in the morning, Moscow time. But there was a brief report on television. The Radio Moscow has carried extensive details. They are very factual, very straightforward. Iraq, which is, of course, a longtime ally of the Soviet Union, has been getting very little sympathy here. Basically, what the Russians have been saying is, we've given them every chance, they've been given every chance, and now what has to be done is being done. So there's a lot of sympathy for the United States, a lot of criticism for Iraq, but the Soviet Union is saying we did everything we could. It's had to come to this. Harry, Paula?
Anthony, how does this fit in with the rest of the news and the rest of the problems that are plaguing the Soviet Union right now with all of the trouble in the Baltics?
Yeah, you're referring, of course, to Lithuania. Radio Moscow began this way this morning. They began by reporting that war had broken out in Iraq. Their second item was, by the way, it's all quiet in Lithuania. The reports that we're getting from Lithuania are indeed that there is no military activity there at this time, but that it is still very tense. As we've been reporting for the last week or so, the Baltics, Lithuania, Latvia in particular, are extremely concerned that while the world's attention is focused on war, that the Soviet army is going to effectively overthrow the pro-independence governments in the Baltics. They are still very concerned about that, and the next couple of days are going to be very tense there, and we're watching very carefully to see if the Soviet army does indeed move. Harry, Paula?
Anthony Mason reporting this morning from Moscow. We'll be checking back in with Anthony a little bit later on today.
And all morning long, we've been showing you pictures of the demonstrations we've seen across the country. Most recently, the one that took place at the Brooklyn Bridge, where 7 people were injured, 2 of them critically. And we're going to check in with Charles Osgood now for some other thoughts and reactions to what we're seeing happening.
Thank you, Paul. Some of those A-6 Navy attack planes on duty in the Gulf are from Whidley Naval Air Station in northern Washington State. The Gulf, of course, they're on carriers at sea. But those still at Ridley handled practice runs as usual. And the news from Iraq was welcomed.
You stand there, you sit there, and you watch this stuff come up, and at some point you become comfortable almost with what you're doing because you're in your cockpit, and then you realize that this isn't the time to become comfortable with what you're doing because you've got stuff being aimed at you. And it kind of jogs you back into reality, and you go, that is aimed for me. I need to be looking at it a little bit better. So it kind of brings you back into reality real quick.
I think that we have got a tremendous Air Force only because of what our people have bought for us, and it's really their Air Force, which you have to understand that. And we have the best equipment in the world right now, and it's working out very, very well. And we've got some good stuff, and we're just proud to be able to employ it.
Those are not some of the young men from Ridley. Those are our pilots returned from missions against Iraq and Kuwaiti targets in that part of the Persian Gulf last night. Speaking of protests, as Paula was, the streets of San Francisco last night were filled with demonstrators and shades of the Vietnam era. That touched off some conflict with police. John Blackstone has a report.
Protesters in the thousands have been on San Francisco's streets since soon after the announcement that America is at war. As the night has gone on, what was meant to be a peaceful demonstration has been punctuated again and again by violence and flames. 2 police cars were seized and set on fire. Demonstrators started a blaze in front of the federal building and hoisted a burning stars and stripes up the flagpole. There were clashes with police when marchers briefly blocked ramps onto the Bay Bridge, the main connection between San Francisco and Oakland. Often, as the violence has started, many of the demonstrators have moved away. That's not why they are on the streets, they say.
Suddenly a cop car was on fire, blowing up, and people started dancing around it like they were against the police. It's the war we're worried about, not breaking down buildings and breaking windows. This is craziness. That's why we're leaving. That's why most of these people are leaving.
Across the bay from San Francisco, in Berkeley, there was more trouble as police tried to stop demonstrators blocking traffic on a busy freeway. But all those on the street tonight were not opposed to the war in the Gulf.
I don't think that everybody is in favor of war. I'm not. But I think what had to be done had to be done.
The demonstrators who carried placards in front of the Concord Naval Weapons Station wanted to tell those on duty in the Gulf they support them all the way. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
President Bush has said that this will not be another Vietnam, but already, as you can see, there are some ghosts of Vietnam, an anti-war movement, and to some extent anyway, a polarization. That in San Francisco last night. Paula and Harry?
Charlie, thank you. Among the things that people are most interested in, I think, this morning are reports of casualties, and I just want to repeat the information that we have this morning, and that is none from our own Pentagon or Department of Defense about any casualties that have been sustained by the Allies or by Americans in the conflict thus far. But there is a BBC report this morning from Bahrain, from one of the Royal Air Force officers, who says that some Allied casualties have in fact been sustained, and that is the latest on that this morning.
In looking through the various reports we've seen in that regard, the only thing he has gone on to say that the level of losses, the airstrikes in Iraqi targets were very low, and once again, like you said, refusing to specify the level of losses.
The only other information with that regard is the French said that 4 of their jets were hit, but that they in fact landed. But that is the only thing close to a casualty report that we have this morning. There are other unconfirmed reports as we speak of activity going back and forth between Allied and Iraqi troops along the Kuwaiti border. We have no confirmation of that either, no official confirmation of that. So we are flying along somewhat by the seat of our pants, working off of rumors, working off of little bits of reports, and waiting for some official confirmation of things that I know there are a lot of people with loved ones over there want to hear some good news or whatever the news is.
We have, in fact, heard from the President this morning in sort of a surprise appearance at the press briefing room, where all he had to say was that things, in his words, are going well, and they're going exactly as we have reported. Right now we're going to go to London, where we're going to catch up with Edmund O'Sullivan. He is the editor of the Middle East Economic Digest, specializing in military strategy. I'm curious, sir, what your reaction is this morning to the airstrikes.
Well, looking at the military tactics being pursued by the international coalition, it seems to me that the political strategy is to deal crushing blows to the industrial and economic strategic capability of Iraq. Now, if Iraq doesn't surrender quickly, and I don't think Saddam Hussein intends to do that, then that means that Iraq will, day by day, will suffer enormous blows to its industrial capabilities, economic capability, and in the end, knocking Iraq back to the kind of backward economic and political state that existed in the country before the present regime took power in 1968.
What do you think will be the economic impact of all this initially?
Well, it's clear that the high-tech sectors of Iraqi economy has been targeted. The nuclear capability, the chemical plants, and it's very difficult to distinguish between those things which can be used for military purposes and those things which are genuine high-tech facilities. So gradually, first of all, we'll be hitting those industrial plants, then it'll move into other economic facilities, and day by day, it's going to deal steadily crushing blows to the Iraqi economy, which will affect the country short, medium, and long term.
And if that happens, as you say it might, it seems to me the regional consequence of this would be that Iran would be strengthened. Can you give us your perspective on that?
Yes, since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Iraq, from an outside point of view, represented a bulwark against radical Islamic movements. And now the strategy being pursued by the international coalition suggests that they want to eliminate Iraq as a significant regional influence. That means that Iran, by default, will be regionally enhanced, making the country much more significant in the Gulf and in the Middle East generally. And that's something which is going to create problems for the international coalition and for the Western powers once this crisis is over.
And what does that mean for the rest of the region?
What it means for the rest of the region is that Iraq, as a mediating, balancing factor amongst a range of competing and complementary Middle East states, will be removed. This is going to have a general destabilizing effect upon the structure of the Middle East political system. But it's going to most directly affect Jordan, no question at all. Watch Jordan very closely over the weeks to come. But the big long-term beneficiary, and I'll come back to this, and it's something that eventually everyone's going to have to address, is that Iran will be very significantly enhanced, both economically and politically in the region, and that is going to create some problems for the outside world, because Iran remains resolutely anti-Western.
Harry Smith's going to jump here in for a moment, who's also with me here in New York. Edmund?
I'm curious, Amman has said, Jordan has said that they want to stay out of this at all costs. Might they be forced to take sides? And we only have about 15 or 20 seconds left.
Well, they won't take sides, and I don't think there's any possibility that the Jordanian government will take sides. But after this crisis is over, I cannot predict with any certainty what's going to happen in Jordan, but I suspect there's going to be a big reaction, anti-Western reaction in that country.
Edmund O'Sullivan, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Our coverage...
This is WCAU-TV in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, transmitting on Channel 10 by authority of the Federal Communications Commission. WCAU-TV is owned by CBS Incorporated and operated by the CBS Television Stations Division. The programs at this station are broadcast for viewing to the public without charge and may not be rebroadcast, recorded, or otherwise used without prior written consent of CBS Incorporated.
We continue now with our round-the-clock coverage of Operation Desert Storm. I'm Harry Smith, along with Paul Azan.
Good morning, everybody.
We'll be joined shortly by our CBS News colleagues, Charles Osgood and others along the line. First, we want to get down to this morning's headline. Here are the latest headlines in our continuous coverage. A commander reports that there have, in fact, been some Allied casualties, but says they've been remarkably low. Allied airstrikes continue against Iraq at this hour. Allies and Iraqis trade fire across the Kuwait border. And President Bush says this morning that things are going well in the Gulf. For the first time since Operation Desert Shield became Operation Desert Storm, there is a report of Allied casualties. The BBC quotes an Allied commander in Bahrain as saying there have been some casualties, but very few. Remarkably low was how he put it. In almost non-stop bombing runs, Allied planes have hit the Iraqi Defense Ministry in Baghdad. And an Egyptian official says the back has been broken of Iraqi air defense. The Americans who have been flying the missions in F-15 and F-4 jets describe what they did and what they saw.
It felt to me just like a right before a big football game or something. I mean, you go to the bathroom 50, 60 times, and you can't do anything when you go. And you sit there and you try to go. You got the butterflies, you got the churn in your stomach. You don't know really what you're going to do.
Despite the destruction, a defiant Saddam Hussein demanded that the U.S. get out of the Gulf, and he promised to destroy both Saudi Arabia and Israel. Mikhail Gorbachev went on Soviet television and told his nation the war in the Gulf is all the fault of one man, Saddam Hussein. Some ground fighting is now reported, the Allies and Iraqis trading artillery fire across the Saudi-Kuwait border. And there are calls for peace in this country, with anti-war demonstrations from Washington to San Francisco and cities in between. That's the headlines to this moment.
And just about a half hour ago, the president made a surprise visit to the White House briefing room, and at that time we caught up with Wyatt Andrews as well. We're going to go back to him now to see if he has anything else new to report. Good morning again, Wyatt.
Paula, good morning. Perhaps it's an indication of how the president's night went that he should be popping into this briefing room at 5:30 in the morning. Physical location counts. The briefing room is right on the other side of the colonnade to my right side here, and it's the path the president takes in between the mansion, which is in front of me, and the West Wing, which is off to my right. He said that he was just popping by, that he was normally up at this hour, and we'll just let you, we'll just play the tape now and let you hear what he said. Are your top advisors on the way in, sir?
I think we'll be seeing in a couple hours. I just got up early and came over. I normally get up at 5, but I wanted to just go down to the sitting room for a while.
All right, good morning. Thanks for stopping in. Before that, the president was asked by me whether or not things were going well, and he said at that point that, well, you all are reporting it pretty well. I've been watching, and it's pretty much as you are reporting. I asked at that point, does that mean, sir, that, can I take it from that things are going militarily well? And he said yes. We do not know at this point, Paula and Harry, whether that is the last we will see of the president today. I suppose that depends on how well things go out in the Gulf. The White House is going to make an appearance today not to be on any particular war footing, despite the fact that the president has said that he is calling in his top advisors this morning. As far as the information apparatus here is concerned, everything will proceed normally. That is, at Marlin Fitzwater, we expect him to brief at around 11 o'clock, and again, we do not yet know whether there will be another presidential appearance. Harry, Paula?
Wyatt, we haven't been able to take the time to really address the political ramifications of all this. What is at stake here for the president?
Well, going to war and making this decision obviously was a huge political risk for the president from the very fact that this was a war that could have been lost. All of us will probably recall last night that there were air raids over Riyadh, air raids over Dhahran. It's perhaps astounding today that we all wake up to find all of our forces intact, no major hits on any Allied installations, very significantly no hit on Israel. And so a lot of things that could have gone wrong have not gone wrong, and there's no war, for example. Israel is not involved in the war. Jordan is not involved in the war. It's very early yet. But politically, since you asked the question that way, Paula, things are going very, very well.
Another thing I'm curious about, earlier on this morning, Harry and I addressed the whole idea of how, in spite of the fact that we've been talking about this for the last 5.5 months, a lot of people were really very much caught by surprise. Did you find that at all in Washington?
I don't think that the fact that the president went to war last night, or made the order, was a surprise in the context of the deadline having come and gone. What perhaps was the surprise, Paula, was that Saddam Hussein faced down the deadline with no blinking. Absolutely everyone in Washington, including some of the president's top advisors, believed that Saddam had the best out possible by simply saying at some point, either before the deadline or immediately after the deadline, that he would consider a withdrawal. They knew here that it would be politically impossible to attack Iraqi troops in retreat, that even if Saddam had offered something partial and pulled out a slight contingent of troops, tried some sort of manipulation along those lines, it would have been tough to have ordered this strike. In that sense, I believe the White House was surprised.
Wyatt Andrews, thanks so much. We'll be checking in with you throughout the morning.
We want to talk right now with Jeffrey Kemp, who is a Middle East specialist, a senior associate at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and a CBS News consultant. Talk a little bit about what's gone on over the last dozen or so hours. Good day to you, Mr. Kemp.
Good morning.
One of the things I think a lot of people are curious about today is, as the bombing started in Baghdad last night, there seemed to be remarkably little resistance to the Allied incursion there, and that while there was anti-aircraft fire, it seems that, at least relatively speaking, that there was little resistance to what appear to be this morning incredibly successful bombing attacks.
Well, tactical surprise is what the name of the game is. And of course, the great advantage the United States and the Allies have is that we can fly and fight at night, and that's very difficult for the Iraqis. But also, I don't believe this war just started with those bombing runs. There was lots of spoofing going on, lots of jamming, lots of electronic warfare underway before the airplanes actually took off. So I think even if the Iraqis knew we were coming, there was very little they could do about it.
There was a report last night on the BBC that some 18,000 tons of bombs had been delivered in those initial attacks last night. Could that much firepower take out what could have been on the list of primary targets for the Pentagon last night?
What's that? 18,000 pounds of explosives. Tons of explosives is equivalent to the explosive power of the Hiroshima bomb. So this was an enormous amount of firepower, and distributed accurately, and I stress accurately, on this wide range of targets all over Iraq. It can do devastating damage, and probably has done, but we won't know for sure until we get a good look at those pictures in daylight.
Let's go over real briefly what were likely primary targets and what might be secondary targets as this bombing continues, as raids likely go on in Baghdad and throughout Iraq.
Primary targets are command, control, and communications to stop the Iraqis communicating with each other and managing the battle. Weapon systems that can threaten American and Allied forces. That's artillery, aircraft, surface-to-air aircraft, surface-to-surface missiles. And then infrastructure. It was very important to bomb a lot of the Iraqi infrastructure that produces chemicals and nuclear weapons in the early stages of the war in case there's a ceasefire. Because whatever happens, the aim has been to set that capability back many, many years.
One of the things that Saddam Hussein vowed as the countdown to January 15th grew closer, and even after the countdown, was that Israel would be a primary target of his. Is it possible or even likely that the Allied forces knocked out Saddam Hussein's missile capability, at least the missiles that may have been able to reach from Baghdad to, or from Iraq to Israel?
Well, I hope so. It looks like it, and certainly Israel's not completely free yet, because there are mobile missiles, as one of your correspondents earlier on pointed out, that could still be used. But there was a lot of debate, quite frankly, about whether or not Iraq did pose a threat to Israel. Some people felt that what missiles could have reached Tel Aviv wouldn't have been very effective. And the only real threat was a psychological one. They could have killed some people in Tel Aviv, but they could not have threatened the Israeli military.
We're awfully frustrated here this morning with the lack of information about U.S. casualties or even Allied casualties. I'm sure you've heard, as we have, the BBC officer, rather the Royal Air Force officer has said that there have been some, while very low. Is it likely in an attack of such incredible magnitude that it has gone as well as it has, and to what do you attribute that?
Well, I would just like to wait a few hours to get confirmation. It looks, from what we've heard, that it almost went too well. And by that I mean that no operation is perfect. There are always setbacks. We've got to be prepared for setbacks, even though I think on balance things are going awfully well so far. But we mustn't expect to get away completely free with an operation as enormous as this.
Is there a reservoir of artillery or a reservoir of military strength that Saddam Hussein may have been holding back that we might suspect will be unleashed upon Allied forces in the not-too-distant future, because the resistance thus far has seemed to be so minimal?
Well, I think the real question is, what is the status of the Iraqi artillery and armor on the front line facing our forces on the Kuwait-Saudi border? If those forces have not been mauled, then they can still fire and they can still inflict casualties. So my guess would be that if they're still operational, they'll be one of the next major targets of our air operations, and possibly at this point we'll see the B-52 bombers used, which would have devastating impact upon the Iraqi artillery.
Jeffrey Kemp joining us this morning from Washington. We thank you so much.
And right now we're going to check in with Jim Stewart, who is standing by live at the Pentagon to see if he has some late-breaking news for us this morning. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Paula. The confidence level that was described earlier by Wyatt Andrews at the White House seems to be reflected here at the Pentagon, too, in these early morning hours. Officials here are still quite pleased with how things are going. There's still no official word here of any U.S. casualties. As Mr. Kemp implied, though, this seems almost incredible, given the amount of combat and over such a wide range that this combat has taken place. Still, there is no official word. In fact, one official made the point last night that all the planes in the first strike returned safely. This would seem to directly refute Iraqi claims that 14 U.S. aircraft or Allied aircraft were shot down. There's still no confirmation here either of these reports that there have been some sort of ground combat at the Saudi Arabian-Kuwait border. Now, of course, there were reports, and these have been confirmed, that Iraq did shell a Saudi Arabian oil facility. And it's been suggested here that perhaps what we're seeing are some artillery exchanges taking place, some spooking going on of troop maneuvers, but no direct ground combat involving U.S. forces yet. Most of the action is still taking place in the air, and pilots returning from these strikes have described the sort of resistance they encountered.
It was pretty exciting as we crossed the border and we watched the ground fire coming up from Kuwait. We knew that we were out of their engagement envelopes, but nonetheless watching the air bursts below us was sobering. You sit there and you watch this stuff come up, and at some point you become comfortable almost with what you're doing because you're in your cockpit, and then you realize that this isn't the time to become comfortable with what you're doing because you've got stuff being aimed at you.
I saw the attack, and it was awesome. There were a lot of bombs going off. It looks a lot like, you know, lights, flickering lights, like Christmas lights or something like that.
Paula, listening to these pilots describe these bombing runs, you're struck by how quickly the United States and the Allied Air Forces appear to have suppressed the air defense systems that Iraq has. Now, unlike the Iraqi Air Force, which has always been rather outnumbered and outgunned and certainly turned in a poor performance, we're told, in the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq's air defenses are quite formidable. They have a whole array of both old and new technology that they have employed. A Hawk missile battery, in fact, was captured from Kuwait when Iraq invaded, and that's a quite accurate system. They also have SAM 7s, 2s, and 3s. These are all Soviet-made surface-to-air missiles. In addition to that, they have a whole array of flat guns which just throw projectiles, bullets, if you will, into the air. And frankly, this seems to be what is concerning the pilots most now. That, in fact, is where the U.S. Air Force encountered most of its casualties in Vietnam, just running into this barrage of metal that's thrown into the air haphazardly over primary target areas. Perhaps one of the reasons, and we can only guess at this, that the United States has enjoyed such success so far is because it was a total surprise. And that applies even here at the Pentagon. I was struck yesterday that some senior officials left the building early, frankly convinced there would be no attack this day, and then had to turn around and return to work when the word first came of the bombing raids. Paula?
Jim Stewart, thank you so much. We'll be, of course, checking in with you throughout the morning as well.
About every 15 minutes or so, we're trying to update all of the latest news, and CBS News coverage of the Persian Gulf War continues. Here are the latest headlines. U.S.-led airstrikes continue against Kuwait and Iraq. One Allied commander says there have been some Allied losses. President Bush says things are, quote, going well, but Saddam Hussein vows to fight on regardless. A British Air Force squadron commander in the Gulf is quoted this morning as saying there have been some Allied casualties, but he says those casualties are, quote, remarkably low. But that has not been confirmed by the Pentagon as of yet. President Bush popped into the White House press room at about 5:30 Eastern Time this morning. He told reporters everything is going according to plan. World markets are responding to the outbreak of war. After a big initial jump up, the price of oil is now heading way down. In London, benchmark crude opened for Thursday trading nearly $6 lower than it closed on Wednesday. Even though it had become quite clear that Saddam Hussein wasn't going to blink and that war was probably going to come, Charles Osgood has some other reflections for us this morning. Charles?
I think it's true, Harry, that most of us, although we had every reason to believe that there was going to be, well, we held on to that hope because we thought maybe at the last minute Saddam Hussein might see the light and might pull out of Kuwait on his own. I think even President Bush had that hope. But when the deadline came and went and there was no response at all from Saddam to all of the different peace efforts that had been made, President Bush came to the conclusion that he was the one who had no real choice.
Withdraw from Kuwait. Now, The 28 countries with forces in the Gulf area have exhausted all reasonable efforts to reach a peaceful resolution, have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force. We will not fail.
It's not as if they hadn't expected it. The families of the servicemen and women in Operation Desert Storm knew that they were there and why they were there. And they knew that all the signs had been pointing toward war. But nevertheless, when the moment came, it was hard. Some were relieved that at long last we might be at the beginning of the end.
I think we have reason to be there, and that we need to just get it out of the way, otherwise Saddam's going to be back doing something else soon.
It's a major mistake. The United States shouldn't be there. They're trying to come up with an end, but it's only a beginning.
In some places, there were echoes of the bad old Vietnam War days. In San Francisco, you might have thought you were in 1971 instead of 1991.
Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
But there was more prayer than protest. A prayer to deliver us from evil.
Amen. And although the news has been good thus far as the progress of the war is concerned, there's still much to pray for because it is by no means over. Harry, Paul?
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. I thought I'd share with you now a piece of copy that's just come across from the Associated Press. We've talked about this a little bit this morning in the interviews we've heard of some of the airmen that have come back from some of the missions, but this is a quote from one of them who said, "We had no adversaries. Those that did get airborne went north as a preservation move. If the Iraqis had stayed on the ground, they would have been bombed, and had they flown in our direction, they would have gotten shot down." So their best move was to go north, and apparently that's what some of the Iraqi Air Force folks did.
We have one other word on a report of casualties. This morning we heard from a Royal Air Force officer who said that some Allied casualties, in fact, had been sustained, but they're very, very low. We don't really have any other information than that, but we also had heard earlier this morning from the French that 4 of a dozen jets that had flown sorties into Iraq and Kuwait had in fact been hit, but they all landed. Here's the latest on that. The first apparent Allied injury is reported. French officials say one of their pilots flying a Jaguar fighter bomber in the air assault was hurt slightly. They say 4 of the 12 planes sent into the fray were hit, but all planes returned safely to base in Saudi Arabia. So that is minimal news of injury thus far. But as soon as we have any information in that regard, especially from our Pentagon or Defense Department, we'll make it available to you.
So right now we're going to take a little trek across the newsroom here to catch up with Steve Croft and David Aaron, who are standing in front of maps, and they may be able to give us a better idea of what's going on right now. Good morning again, Steve.
Good morning, Paula. I would point out that you mentioned the French planes, that 4 of them being hit. That was part of a combined U.S. operation. So it's conceivable that there could have been U.S. planes that were hit also in the same operation. The Americans really, David, are the only ones that have not acknowledged any casualties and not made any statements at all on sustained war damage. It's now 2 o'clock or thereabouts in Iraq, broad daylight. There have got to be satellite photos. There have to have been reconnaissance flights. The information has got to be coming into the White House and the Pentagon now. They should know what's going on, right?
Well, I think they probably are starting to get the bomb damage assessment. They're finding out what targets have been hit. Have they been successful in striking the airfields? Have they been successful in striking the command and control centers? Have they been successful in hitting the missile sites? And I think that they also have to be encouraged by the news reporting. It's quite clear that in Washington, because it's quite clear that we're flying with impunity over Baghdad. It's very obvious that the Iraqis have not been able to muster any kind of a counterstrike, neither in the air nor with their Scud missiles or anything of that sort. And so I think that the people in Washington have to feel very good about the reports that are coming in from every source.
Thank you, David. Back to Paul and Harry.
Steve, David, thank you very, very much. We're going to update headlines again in a couple of minutes, but that's the news that we have thus far as CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues. I'm Harry Smith, along with Paul Azan, as we're in CBS News headquarters this morning, along with Steve Croft and Charles Osgood and CBS News correspondents throughout the world. We'll be checking in with some others of those in just a couple of minutes. This is a particularly troubling time for Arab Americans, fearing their civil liberties might become a casualty of war. Already, some Arab Americans have come under increasing scrutiny by law enforcement agencies concerned with terrorism. One of the nation's oldest Arab American communities is in Detroit, and CBS News correspondent Harold Dow is there.
Today, a prayer for President George Bush and Saddam Hussein.
Guide their actions so that all civilians and soldiers in the Gulf area are protected from the suffering of war.
250,000 Arab Americans, Christian and Muslim, live here in the Detroit area. The largest Arab American community in the United States.
We are Americans first. We are loyal to this country. We're here because we choose to be here, because this is the land of the free.
Gary Beydoun was born in Lebanon, but now he lives here with his wife and 3 children.
We're against war.
Gary's wife, Amina.
Okay. You're a good American, you support your president. You're a good Arab, you support Saddam Hussein or whoever's over there. But when you're an Arab American, it hurts deeper than it would hurt an American who is against the war. Because it's my people that are going to be killed here, it's my people that are going to be killed there.
50,000 soldiers might be killed. That's according to one analyst. But also 250,000 Iraqis. Half of them might be civilians, babies, women. For what? If you feel that he wants to talk about the FBI.
Gary is president of the local chapter of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee.
Now, I will stop by the office.
Okay, I'll see you.
The ADC office. Bye-bye.
An organization that battles stereotypes.
ADC may help you.
I fly 10,000 miles to smoke a camel.
Yeah.
And sometimes threats against Arab Americans.
She was like, this woman's gotten a lot of death threats.
We take every threat that comes in very seriously.
You know, I'd first like to know what happened to you. Maybe we...
Since the Gulf crisis, it's been getting worse.
The people that call and threaten us, they don't know that we have our kids on the ground, possibly fighting their own cousins in Iraq.
And some Arab Americans feel their loyalty has been questioned by the FBI. Local ADC coordinator Jessica Daher.
The premise that we would know something and not speak out to the point where the FBI has to come and ask us is ridiculous. And it's insulting. You know, as an American citizen, it's insulting.
We don't even need anyone to question our loyalty.
What do you say then to some Americans who might feel that people who live in the Arab community, Arab Americans, could be terrorists or associated with terrorists?
Did you see any terrorist activity around? I mean, the answer to that is just very clear. I mean, this whole thing is hallucination.
What's the mood of this community? What's the feeling right now?
It's tense. People are scared.
Are you torn?
I'm talking from my heart. What is wrong? What is wrong, again, with us as a superpower, the United States of America, taking a leading role in resolving the issues of Arabs and Israelis and deal with the Palestinian question? What's wrong with that?
Well, Dan, I think now that the deadline has passed, there's going to be an increase in the
U.S. and Allied air activity over Saudi Arabia.
I think we're right now on the edge, on the most serious event in the entire history of the United States of America. Worse than Vietnam. I came from the Middle East. Arabs there will not accept America killing innocent people. The question again got to be asked, what's after that?
We pray for Saddam Hussein and George Bush.
That's Harold Dow reporting from Detroit last night.
For those of you just waking up, you may not have had the opportunity to get to the newsstand this morning, so we thought we'd bring the headlines to you. This is how the New York Times led today's paper. I guess you can't see it too close up, but U.S. and allies open air war on Iraq.
This is what USA Today looks like.
U.S. bombs Baghdad. New York Newsday, a little bit easier here to see war. New York Post, war. And here we go from the Daily News. We slam Saddam. Boston Herald, we will not fail. For the most part, we haven't had a chance to read through all of the op-ed pages, but the editorial staff said although they didn't necessarily endorse the policies of the president going into this, now that our men and women are engaged in war, they're 100% behind them. That seems to be pretty much the tone of most of the editorials I've gotten my hands on this morning.
And over the last couple of days, as we have talked with members of Congress who were
on the
fence or very much supportive of continuing sanctions and voted against the use of force, that people in Washington, very much before the bombing started and the war started last night, had closed ranks behind the president and said the time was now to support the president. Certainly that's an important thought to have today, as we have hundreds of thousands of men and women serving over there, and the families of all of those men and women back here in the United States are praying and concerned about their welfare this morning.
And our coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues. My partner Harry Smith and I welcome you back to CBS's coverage of the Persian Gulf War. I thought I would start this morning with some of the latest headlines if you have not been with us all night long. President Bush says things are going well. A commander calls Allied casualties remarkably low. Wave after wave of bombing raids hit Iraq and Kuwait, and on the ground, Iraq and the Allies exchange artillery fire. President Bush paid a surprise visit to the White House press room about an hour ago, and he told reporters things are going well. Mr. Bush had a similar assessment last night in his televised address announcing the start of Operation Storm, Desert Storm, that is.
Initial reports from General Schwarzkopf are that our operations are proceeding according to plan. Our objectives are clear. Saddam Hussein's forces will leave Kuwait. The legitimate government of Kuwait will be restored to its rightful place, and Kuwait will once again be free.
The first air raids began at 7 o'clock Eastern Time when American F-14s and F-4 Wild Weasels led the first Allied airstrikes against Iraq and Iraqi positions in Iraq and Kuwait.
It looks a lot like, you know, lights, flickering lights, like Christmas lights or something like that when the AAA's coming up. And then shortly after that, it looks like some big bomb fireworks or something like that going off. It was an awesome display, it truly was.
There has since been a second wave of air attacks and the first reports of ground combat, with Iraqi forces trading artillery fire with Allied positions in Saudi Arabia. This morning we have our first report of Allied casualties. One commander in Bahrain says there have been some casualties, but they've been, in his words, remarkably low. Still, any word of casualties is bad news for the families who wait at home while their loved ones face combat or even the possibility of combat. And the anti-war movement is alive and strong in this country. A large demonstration in San Francisco was matched by similar marches in Washington and at UN headquarters in New York. And those are the headlines up until the moment.
Even as you were reading this morning's headlines, we have a wire story this morning out of Amman, Jordan, which says Iraqi artillery began bombarding oil installations in eastern Saudi Arabia, and an oil refinery on the east coast of the kingdom was hit. That is according to Amman Radio out of Jordan. We don't have any independent confirmation of this. The radio said a huge oil storage tank was hit in the shelling. It also reported Iraqi gunners hit a U.S. jet fighter and the pilot ejected into the Persian Gulf. A similar report was carried on Iranian state television. We're getting all kinds of reports of this nature. Earlier this morning, Iraqi radio, that is, claimed 14 Allied planes were hit during the initial attacks in Iraq. And of course, we can only question the nature of that report coming out of Iraq, and certainly can suspect a certain amount of propaganda coming out of Baghdad and the capital this morning. We will keep you up to date, of course, on any reports of casualties, et cetera, as that comes our way, and as that we get any official confirmation of that. We want to go back down to Washington this morning right now and check in with Fred Haynes, who is a retired general from the Marine Corps. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. What's your reaction to initial reports, especially of what seems to be a substantial wave of success on the Allied runs at Baghdad overnight?
Well, I feel pretty optimistic about them. I believe that, of course, we have an enormous advantage in that we have the initiative, and the initiative makes its own luck. And I believe we're going after all of the appropriate targets. I'm encouraged. I believe that there is one byword, and that is pressure, pressure, and more pressure. And that way, I think we'll bring Hussein to his knees.
One of the things that a lot of us were impressed with, or found maybe the better word is peculiar, is that there seemed to be remarkably little resistance, or what resistance there was last night didn't seem to be very effective. How do you account for that?
I think, first of all, we caught the forces pretty much by surprise. Even though they were aware that war was imminent, I believe we caught them by surprise, and I think that our efforts at jamming their communications, their radar, their radio networks, and so on, must have been highly successful. In fact, that is a fundamental key to success in this operation. If we can keep the communication systems of all types down or badly jammed, we continue to have an enormous advantage and can continue to eat away at the structure of Hussein's forces.
One of the reports we heard in the last several hours was that Baghdad was in fact lit up last night, that there was no blackout, that Baghdad seemed to be completely taken by surprise by the attack. If the city had been blacked out, would the attack last night have been as successful, do you think?
I don't know that it would have been either less or more successful. Lighting of the city is perhaps a help in some navigation, but I believe with the sophistication of our air power and our aircraft that were used last night, it's a relatively minor point.
What do the Allies need to be going after now, assuming that they were relatively successful in going after primary targets last night? What would the objectives be at this point?
I think at this point, a continued pressure on the Iraqi Air Force is essential. And if that has been destroyed or as badly damaged as it appears to have been, we need to keep pressure on the missilery that may still have gone untouched. But finally, in the very near future, we have to bring power to bear on the ground forces themselves. And I think the devastating power, for example, of B-52s can be brought to bear on the fixed positions of the Iraqi in the southern part of that area, down around the Kuwaiti borders, and that we will then begin to see some decisive ground action.
Let me ask you another question real quick. Can airstrikes be effective even against positions that seem to be so substantially dug in? We've seen illustration after illustration of how these tanks are buried under tons and tons of sand, and that There are berms and all kinds of fortification. Can massive airstrikes be effective even against that sort of fortressing?
Yes, they can be. Those of us who remember the use of B-52s 20 years ago during the Vietnam War will, I think, attest to that fact. The B-52 is very accurate. It carries a devastating load of bombs, and despite the fact that these fortifications have in some cases been built pretty strongly, it is my personal belief that they will be an added capability that is so useful in the desert that will then lead to much better opportunities for our ground forces to move in and to defeat the enemy at close combat.
Fred Haynes, this is Paula Zahn, Harry's partner here. I was just going to jump in for a moment. You said our goal is to bring Saddam Hussein to his knees. I'm wondering if you can give us any sense at all of how long you think these bombing raids will continue and what sort of ground combat we might see.
I think the bombing raids will continue for the indefinite future. I think there will be a shift to what I call more tactical targets. With respect to the total length of the affair, I'm looking at about a month. I think the key to the length of it, however, is the extent to which the Army of Iraq is able to hold together. If the communications and the ability to control are destroyed, as I happen to think they have been and will continue to be, then eventually the Army becomes really a mob and they can be defeated piecemeal. I'm not saying destroy Iraq at all. I'm saying really bring the Army down and destroy the capability to fight, and then I think we can see a negotiation and get on with the business of international politics and economics.
General Fred Haynes, we thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you, sir, from Washington.
And we're going to take a look now at some network pool pictures of some of the pilots who flew in some of the initial missions overnight. Let's listen in.
Well, the biggest thing I saw was one of the most fantastic fireworks demonstrations I've seen since 4th of July party years and years and years ago. This was tremendous. Baghdad was lit up like a Christmas tree. Looked like everything in downtown was, fireworks were going off, a lot of AAA, impacts on the ground. I think we hit there just about the time we're 40 miles south is when they're pounding targets in Baghdad.
We didn't want to be at war, none of us did, but it's here, it was going to happen. That's what we've been preparing for, and I just hope it's over soon.
I'm pumped up. I felt that for a while I thought maybe the resolutions and stuff could work. Apparently they couldn't. I guess Mr. Hussein's going to have to learn the hard way.
It was pretty exciting as we crossed the border and we watched the ground fire coming up from Kuwait. We knew that we were out of their engagement envelopes, but nonetheless watching the airbursts below us was sobering nonetheless.
What did it look like?
Exactly like the movies, to be real honest. The ground fire of the artillery coming up and the airburst below us. It was exciting.
Wasn't that frightening as opposed to exciting?
Well, the fact that we're engaged in the mission and we're very much wrapped up with what we're doing with our jet, traveling right at the speed of sound. And that initially, we watched the ground fire come up, and the first response was, gee, that's neat, and then the second response is, it's aimed at me. And then it became very realistic.
We flew into Iraq, and we did escort. We escorted a multinational force, and had the ability to go in there. I can't get into numbers of different type of aircraft or what targets were, anything like that. But we went in with a group of guys, and we got everybody out, and that was the most important thing to us. So our entire package got in and out, and we felt pretty happy about that.
Now, did you encounter any resistance?
We encountered a few airplanes coming up, nothing that really came close enough to us to deliver ordnance or anything. They were mainly coming up and going north. So they didn't come through to the south for us.
Colonel, why do you think that you didn't get any Iraqi planes coming up to intercept?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if probably we were just lucky at the time frame where we went.
Pilots being debriefed after flying missions into Baghdad late last night, early this morning, and those are interviews that were come from pool pictures that were provided this morning. We want to check in with Bill Plant, our State Department correspondent, who is at the State Department in Washington this morning. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning to you, Harry.
What is the news from Foggy Bottom this morning?
Well, I guess it won't surprise anybody to hear that there has been no contact with Iraq, no diplomatic contact, no contact of any kind, really. The only thing the U.S. has heard from Iraq is the radio speech last night in which Saddam Hussein welcomed the mother of all battles. There is some talk about going back to the UN and making some effort to get another United Nations Security Council resolution, still calling on Saddam Hussein to pull out of Kuwait. The feeling here has always been that there's a possibility he would want to take the first blow, which he certainly has overnight, and then perhaps pull out on what he would say were his own terms. This, it is felt, would give him some increased standing in the Arab world as the leader who stood up to the West. But it's hard to predict, of course, what he will do. He's been known to turn on a dime 180 degrees when it suited him in the past, and there is still a school of thought here which thinks that he may yet do that again. But for now, they're watching and waiting. Secretary of State Baker will start his day with breakfast at the White House with the Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, and probably with the President. And after that, it's all wait and watch.
Bill, we can often get a little bit of an idea of what the next diplomatic move is from the State Department and from the Secretary of State's travel schedule. Do you have any knowledge whatsoever this morning of where he may be headed?
No, Harry, we don't. We just came back, as you know, from an extensive trip in which he consulted with all of the members of this coalition, or most of them. And the standing joke, if you will, is that the next time we travel, it'll probably be to Kuwait. And I fully would expect him to do that, but obviously not in the next few days.
All right. Bill Plant reporting from the State Department this morning in Washington.
And for those of you that might just be joining us now, we're going to bring you up to date on some of the latest headlines in the Persian Gulf War. The massive Allied bombing attacks continue in Kuwait and Iraq. One air commander in the Gulf says Allied casualties are remarkably low. President Bush says so far so good, things are going well. But Saddam Hussein says he'll never give up. President Bush has called together his top advisors for an early morning meeting at the White House. Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater will hold a question and answer briefing on what's now called Operation Desert Storm. That briefing at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. U.S. pilots returning from their bombing mission say Iraqi warplanes did not engage them in battle. The Iraqi jets turned tail and ran north. Based on word the war is going well, the price of crude oil in London opened down nearly $6 a barrel this morning. In Tokyo, the Japanese stock exchange closed higher in Thursday trading. The Nikkei average was up 1,000 points, nearly 4.5%. And that's the latest from here.
We want to keep our finger on the pulse of a number of different Americans this morning and how they view what's gone on in the Gulf and in the bombing of Baghdad last night. I want to go to Los Angeles right now, where a couple of actors are standing by with some responses to what they have seen and heard over the last dozen hours or so. Do you mind identifying yourselves to us this morning?
Well, I'm Sam Longoria. And Steve Tyler.
Steve, let me start with you. What is your reaction to what you have seen and heard through the night?
Well, I have to commend the American administration for making a decision, for setting a deadline, and for moving with force. I think they really showed the world that we're not going to be pushed around, that I mean, we gave them plenty of time to make a decision, plenty of time to back out. We made the decision, we went in with full force and showed them.
Sam, what's your reaction?
Well, first I'd like to say, I'm an American-born person, and I'm a libertarian. I believe in freedom. I have to say that throughout my lifetime, there's been all manner of wars waged by presidents without a specific act of Congress that would be a declaration of war. And I feel terrible that presidents go out and do this kind of thing, whether or not the Congress is, in this time they got kind of a token rubber stamp approval from the Congress, which is pretty incredible. I think it's the Congress's job to declare war, not the president. And I feel badly that this isn't done exactly, by the book. I think that the president certainly has the right to defend the country if it's attacked, and as commander-in-chief, he should do that. And in fact, I mean, if an enemy attacks the United States, I'm going to be down there on the beach myself, shooting at whoever is attacking. But I think it's terrible that we're going around the world acting as its policeman.
How do you feel, though, about the idea that now that the shooting has started, that especially for those hundreds of thousands of fighting men and women who are over in Saudi Arabia and throughout the Gulf, that they need our support? Can we second-guess the president and give them support at the same time?
I think they do have the support of the American people. I mean, unfortunately, we've lost thousands of lives to get to the point we are in this country today. And I know that our military is ready to fight. I mean, they've been geared up for this. They've had plenty of warning. I think they're ready. They're behind us. We just can't have another World War II on our hands. Hopefully, we all pray that this lasts only a short time, but we have to take a stand. We took the stand. We went for it. I think it's a tremendous thing. I mean, if he's not stopped now, we're going to end up with another Hitler. And, I mean, that was a disaster. I'm so glad that President Bush made the decision, that he stuck to his guns and he went for it.
Sam, what do you think, though?
Well, World War II is an excellent example of a declared war where that was declared by the Congress, and the president asked them for them to exercise their powers, and he did not usurp their role in the scheme of things. I feel that that's not the president's job. I mean, Steve and I disagree here on this thing, but we do improv comedy together at a theater in North Hollywood, and you get the chance to see other people's viewpoints all the time. And I believe that our soldiers and everything certainly deserve our support. I wish them every good intention, and I certainly will include them in my prayers. The thing is that I feel that they wouldn't be in jeopardy if the military were only maintained for our defense rather than strictly interfering in other countries' affairs.
All right. Sam, Steve, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We have a camera set up in a delicatessen in Los Angeles. From time to time, we'll talk to some of the patrons there to find out what some Americans are thinking today.
We also have a late report now from the Pentagon. It is now dismissing as an exaggeration the Iraqi radio reports that 14 Allied warplanes have been shot down. But one Pentagon source says officials cannot rule out the possibility that there have been some casualties. There have been, at this point, no reports of U.S. casualties, but British news reports now say a British Tornado fighter bomber was lost during the second wave of bombing. There is no word on the fate of that two-man crew. And the French, of course, say one of their pilots was slightly injured by anti-aircraft fire, something we reported a little bit earlier on this morning. Right now, we're going to go to Steve Croft for an update from your end of the desk. Good morning again.
Thank you, Paula. We don't really know how many planes have been involved in massive airstrikes this morning. We do know sometime during the course of the night, it was reported out of the Pentagon that there were more than 1,000 individual missions. We are getting some sense from pictures from crews in Saudi Arabia now what it was like there on the bombing missions from bases in Saudi Arabia. The first planes out are back now at this airbase in the Persian Gulf, back from Baghdad, where they bombed surface-to-air SAM missile sites. One pilot, Lieutenant Colonel George Walton of San Antonio, Texas, said Iraq's capital city was lit up by the raid.
The biggest thing I saw was one of the most fantastic fireworks demonstrations I've seen since 4th of July party years and years and years ago. This was tremendous. Baghdad was lit up like a Christmas tree.
Colonel Walton said Iraqi resistance was no problem. His mission was accomplished. The war at this base began at 1:30 in the morning Iraqi time. That's when the first of the F-4s from the 35th Tactical Fighter Wing took off from this runway. They were followed by wave after wave of Marine Corps FA-18 fighter attack jets. The U.S. military fully expected Iraq to retaliate on this base, and there were 2 air raid alerts during the night. Iraqi missiles were detected heading this way at one point, but apparently fell short. Commanders here warn that the daylight hours could bring danger. They fear that Iraq may still have hidden missiles to send this way, and without the cover of darkness, pilots may now face additional risks in the air as well. Meanwhile, the planes that returned this morning are being rearmed and made ready to go again. Paula? Eric?
Thank you, Steve. And CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
Don't go in. We continue now with our coverage, round-the-clock coverage here on CBS News of the war in the Gulf. And Steve Croft is with us this morning, and you have some news about the Navy. And
well, I have just some observations about the Navy. There are more than 50,000 American servicemen on ships with the fleet off the coast, and very little has been said about what's going on. And we don't really have much information, only some speculation from talking with David Aaron, former National Security Advisor, is that they're probably being held back right now until total air superiority is clearly established. But it is probably safe to speculate that they were involved in the bombing attacks on the Scud missile positions in western Iraq that were threatening the Israeli nationals, only because they're very close, so that would logistically it would make the most sense.
From the carriers and the
But other than that, there's been officially no word, and you would really expect the Navy and the fleet to become more involved probably tomorrow, the next day, once air superiority is established.
I think that's one of the real curiosities of the morning, and what a lot of people are really waiting for is a serious Pentagon debriefing on what branches of the military were deployed in this attack on Baghdad and all of the targets through Iraq and Kuwait last night. It's, I think, a question of tremendous curiosity, especially for the men and women who are looking at how their families may have been in harm's way last night, where the Navy was used and how it was used, and how other forces in the Air Force and the Army were used as well.
Right now, we're going to go to a tape report out of Oceanside, California, from David Dow to get a better perspective on what some of the families there are thinking about now.
The air attacks against Iraq launched yet another countdown for this community, home of some 30,000 Camp Pendleton Marines deployed in the Persian Gulf area. Most are ground forces, and for them the question is how many days before the air attacks give way to a ground invasion that could involve them in combat. When President Bush addressed the nation via television tonight, in one local restaurant here, you could hear a pin drop. The television was on, too, in hundreds of homes of Pendleton Marines. This woman, the fiancée of a Marine in Saudi Arabia, expressed the hope of most, that the conflict would be successful and quick.
I pray for them. I pray for President Bush and hope that God will give him the wisdom that he needs to do it, and God bless him for being able to make the decisions, because I know there's a lot of other people that wouldn't be able to. And I hope they come home quickly, get the job done. I hope that they're safe.
What are your thoughts for your fiancé right now?
To do his job to the best of his ability. He is heart and soul Marine Corps, and he wouldn't be anywhere else. And just if he can do what he's trained to do, then he'll be okay.
The attack on Iraq prompted special editions of one local newspaper. Another will send newsboys into the streets of Oceanside in a few hours to scream the headlines. In the local business district, reaction to the attack has been largely one of support mixed with concern.
It seems that they are sad. A lot of them, it appears, have relatives over and they're fighting the war, and they don't know exactly what to expect. So you see a lot of people with jitteries.
I was kind of anxious for the guys over there, you know. I know some people over there, and kind of worried about them.
My own opinion is I think it's about time the United States starts sticking up for themselves, because I know I was in Vietnam, and it was really a political war over there. And like I said, I agree with them going in the way they did now and getting it over and done with instead of dragging it out.
One source of relief here, that so far there have been no reports of counterattacks involving chemical weapons. Among the wives and others who wait for their loved ones here, that possibility had been among the deepest fears. David Dow, CBS News, Oceanside, California.
We're looking for any kinds of news about casualties, and one of the things that we reported earlier this morning, and it was a report, of course, from Iraqi radio, and you have to consider the nature of a report like this, but Iraqi radio reported earlier this morning that 14 Allied planes, in fact, had been shot down, and that was nothing that we ever heard any sort of confirmation of. And
although I'm told now the Pentagon is actually dismissing that as a gross exaggeration. The Pentagon at this point cannot rule out the possibility of U.S. casualties, but it's certainly not confirming this report in any way at all. In fact, the only confirmation I believe that we've gotten at this point is a British news report that says that a British Tornado fighter bomber was lost during the second wave of bombings. There's no word yet on that two-man crew and their fate. And we've been reporting all morning long that the French have reported one slight injury of their pilot. 4 of their planes, what did they say? 4 out of the 12 that flew were hit in some way and have now returned safely.
The French say the first apparent Allied injury reported, French officials say, one of their pilots flying a Jaguar fighter bomber in the air assault was slightly hurt. They say 4 of the 12 planes sent into the fray were hit, but all planes returned safely to base in Saudi Arabia. So that's the latest we have as regard to casualties
and
this
as
morning.
the morning goes on, I think this will become a little clearer. There will be a Pentagon briefing at 11 o'clock this morning, which of course we will be covering live, and it's hoped that a lot of these questions and a lot of this confusion will be cleared up at that time.
In the meantime, we will have a reaction from around the United States, and in a few short minutes, more like a few short seconds, we'll be able to check in with our various correspondents in Washington and around the globe with the latest news as our CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
And we want to welcome you to a special edition of CBS This Morning. CBS News special coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues. Good morning, everybody. I'm Paula Zahn.
And I'm Harry Smith. Here are the top headlines in our continuous coverage. Operation Desert Storm is 12 hours old now, and 2 waves of airstrikes have hit Iraq and Kuwait. President Bush says it is going well. Allied casualties are called remarkably low, and the Pentagon discounts Iraqi claims that 14 Allied planes were shot down. The Persian Gulf has now been at war for half a day. American F-18, F-15, and F-4 jets led the Allied assault on Iraq and positions in Kuwait. Among other targets, they're said to have made a pinpoint hit on the Iraqi Defense Ministry in Baghdad. When the pilots returned to base, they talked with reporters.
Lots of ground fire, lots of AAA, that's anti-aircraft artillery. And like I say, I think there was one SAM fired that I saw, but it was so far away and up through the smoke and haze, it was hard to make it out.
The ground troops who wait for what may soon be their call to arms applauded the efforts of their comrades in the air.
I was relieved. I said, it's about time. As I said, when the first bullets started flying, that's when we started our countdown to going home.
I was feeling really excited that something's going on. In a way, I was scared, though, because there was a possibility that we're going to die. Nobody really wants to die.
I went and woke up all my men and let them know what was going on, and everybody woke up and gave me a hooah, and that was outstanding to hear. I thought it was really exciting.
The Allied cause got an unqualified endorsement from Mikhail Gorbachev. In a TV speech, Gorbachev placed the blame on Saddam Hussein. For his part, Saddam demanded that the U.S. and other Western powers get out of the Gulf. He vowed again to destroy Israel and conquer Saudi Arabia. Baghdad Radio painted a picture of Saddam as a man in charge touring the streets of his embattled capital. Also this morning, the first official word on Allied casualties. Without being specific, an Allied commander in Bahrain calls them remarkably low. And the Pentagon says an Iraqi claim that 14 Allied planes have been shot down is an exaggeration. In a rare occurrence in the Middle East, America's traditional ally Israel is on the sidelines in this war.
It's an almost unbelievable success to hit all the targets in accordance to the plan without losing one plane. We didn't succeed to do it in the Six-Day War. We paid heavily for the achievement of air supremacy then.
Pope John Paul responded to the war in the Gulf with a plea for world peace, a sentiment echoed in the hearts of many Americans, including the families of the troops who are facing battle, and by peace activists who took their argument to the very front door of the United Nations last night. There were also peace demonstrations in other cities, some of the largest in Washington and in San Francisco. That's the headlines to this hour.
As you said earlier on, this war is now some 12 hours old, and I think one of the most frustrating things for all of us is the speed at which this information comes through to us. Let's go to the Pentagon right now, where Jim Stewart is standing by for an update. Good morning again, Jim.
Morning, Paula. The mood here at the Pentagon is still one of optimism and satisfaction at the way events are proceeding thus far. The Pentagon is still adamant this morning that, in the words of one official, Iraqi claims that they shot down 14 U.S. aircraft are patently ridiculous. However, the Pentagon does confirm that at least one Allied aircraft was apparently hit and is missing. That's identified as a British aircraft. There's no official word yet on what happened to the crew, although there are unofficial reports, unconfirmed here, that the crew managed to safely eject and were rescued. Remarkably, there is still no word here of U.S. casualties, although officials here stress that they too are getting information in drips and drabs. I might point out now that there has been a change in the time that Secretary Cheney and General Colin Powell, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, will brief the press. That's now scheduled for 9 this morning, and we're told there will be additional details of these 2 airstrikes that have taken place. Now, also, there have been reports we know from Saudi Arabia that there may be some ground combat over there this morning. We're told here that there's just no confirmation of that either. Instead, we're led to believe that what may be taking place is an exchange of artillery fire. As we know, the Iraqis did manage to set fire to one Saudi oil field, but that has been the only report of damage. Paula?
Jim Stewart reporting from the Pentagon. Thanks so much. Right now, we're going to go to Saudi Arabia, where Bob Simon is standing by in Dhahran. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Paula. That Saudi oil facility, which is in fact owned and run by the Japanese, has been seriously damaged. You can see the smoke for approximately 40 miles. CBS newsman Peter Bluff just returned from a solo 300-kilometer drive to the border. He reports that there was a direct hit on this facility and that it seems to be in fairly bad shape. Mr. Bluff also reports that the town of Kafji nearby, a small town, has been completely abandoned by its citizens. He saw doors still open, cars on the road, people abandoning their belongings. What is even more worth noting at this point is not so much that the town has been abandoned by its civilians, but that all the Saudi troops who were stationed up there have also fled. Peter said that there are no Saudi troops at all between the border and approximately 40 kilometers south of the border, where he saw some Allied troops digging in with tow missiles. So the one Iraqi hit has apparently been a successful hit, but it's the only one we can confirm at this time. Otherwise, the war seems to have been proceeding remarkably according to plan. One of the oldest truisms of war is that no battle plan survives its first contact with the enemy, but in this case so far that seems to be remarkably untrue. You spoke of 2 waves of bombers, of fighters that have already gone to Saudi, gone to Iraq. Well, a third must be on its way, because we just saw some F-15s and Tornadoes taking off from this base in Dhahran. Paula?
Bob, are you surprised at how swift and efficient these first 2 waves of attacks seem to have been?
Paula, I think we have to remember that this vast air armada, perhaps the most powerful and precise air armada ever assembled, was designed to fight the Soviet Union. not a third world country. It is the Air Force that has been ready. It's the Air Force that said from the start that we can do the job. They've been ready to do the job for a long time. It is going remarkably well, apparently, but I don't think it's a major shock. This is the part of the vast force assembled here that everyone has voiced the most confidence in.
Bob Simon reporting from Saudi Arabia for us this morning. And right now we're going to turn our attention to Washington, where Wyatt Andrews is standing by, who had a surprise visit of sorts with the president earlier this morning. Good morning, Wyatt.
Paula, good morning. The president popped into the briefing room briefly, saying he was on his way to the situation. That was at 5:30 Eastern Time, roughly an hour and a half ago. He said at that time that things were going, quote unquote, exactly as you all are reporting. I asked if that meant, in his assessment, are things going militarily well? He said yes. The president also then discussed the fact that most of his top advisors, including Secretary Cheney and Secretary Baker, are en route to the White House. We believe that meeting will take place sometime between now and 7:30 Eastern Time.
Wyatt Andrews.
Advisors on the way in, sir.
I think we'll be seeing a couple hours. I got up early and came over. I normally get up at 5, but I wanted to just go down to the sitting room for a while.
All right, good morning. Thanks for stopping in. Harry, you with me here? To recap briefly how this transpired, the order for these airstrikes and to go to war was actually given to Secretary Cheney at 3 in the afternoon on Tuesday, before the expiration of the UN deadline. But the White House and the Pentagon delayed implementation of that to give Saddam Hussein, quote unquote, a grace period to say something to indicate that he might pull out. Despite calls, last-minute calls to give sanctions a chance, a last-minute appeal from Mikhail Gorbachev to try to call Saddam one more time, the president made good on his assurances that he would attack sooner rather than later. And last night in his address to the American people, he explained why.
Some may ask, why act now? Why not wait? The answer is clear. The world could wait no longer. Sanctions, though having some effect, showed no signs of accomplishing their objective. Sanctions were tried for well over 5 months, and we and our allies concluded that sanctions alone would not force Saddam from Kuwait.
Up on Capitol Hill today, we are already hearing calls in both chambers for resolutions of renewed support for the president's policy. I'm sure we'll hear more about that later. So far, as you might predict, the debate is over for the time being on Capitol Hill, and the reaction up there has been overwhelmingly positive.
I think all of us are deeply concerned that this war now be as short as possible, that, as the president indicated, it be with the minimum loss of life and is decisive in its result.
I'm glad to see us going in real strength and not piecemealing things as we did in Vietnam. In war, moderation is not to be admired in war. Moderation, as I said on the Senate floor the other day, is self-defeating in combat.
The world is already probably a safer place than it otherwise would have been were it not for the courage of the American military, because I would guess that we have begun to knock out the chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons capacity of the Iraqi military.
One important political note disclosed by Marlin Fitzwater, the president's spokesman, last night, and that is that, and we did not know this before, and that is that the president has decided not to seek a formal declaration of war, that he considers the combination of the UN authority to pursue any means to evict Iraq from Kuwait, along with the congressional resolutions voted over the weekend, to be legal authority enough. Harry and Paula?
Thank you, Wyatt. Wyatt Andrews reporting from the White House for us this morning. Iraq did not attack Israel when the war began, contrary to the threats of Saddam Hussein. And joining us now from Jerusalem is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel. And good morning, sir.
Good morning.
We understand there is a sense of relief there among some folks this morning, but is the threat really over?
Relief, yes, but complete relief, no. I think that it's still possible that Saddam Hussein may have some capacity to strike Israel. So we still maintain a state of alert, a state of vigilance of our armed forces. We hope that this continues, that nothing will happen here.
Are you surprised by what appears to be a real lack of resistance on the Iraqis' part to the Allied bombings?
Well, first of all, we're very impressed with the performance of the American and Allied, but especially American pilots. I think this is a remarkable achievement, even though it's not yet complete. I think, too, that we are not that surprised nonetheless, because we know American pilots. We've trained with them. We've flown American planes. We know the superiority of your manpower and of your equipment, and it's been proven.
We know that several Iraqi missile sites have in fact been destroyed. Do you believe they still have the capability to deliver chemical weapons from Iraq?
We can't rule it out. There are a number of possibilities. But this is something that, from our point of view, could be ascertained only when it's over. I suppose in war the cliche holds, it ain't over until it's over.
And in your mind, what is the biggest threat that is posed to Israel right now by Iraq?
Well, there are two basic ways that Iraq could strike at Israel, or could have struck at Israel. We'll find out very soon. One is with missiles, either mobile or launched from fixed bases. And the second is aircraft. We cannot at this time say that all of these possibilities have been eliminated. But we certainly can say that the threat has been significantly reduced. So we're keeping people still in a state of alert. The possibility that missiles will penetrate here means that we'll have gas penetrating there. And we've taken the precautions. I travel with my gas mask. So does anybody else who's not staying at home. But most of the people are staying at home, and they're prepared. Now, you can imagine what it means for an 80-year-old to put this thing on at 3 o'clock in the morning, or for toddlers to put on gas masks. But we have the preparations, and we have confidence in our pilots, but we also are very much impressed by your pilots.
Mr. Netanyahu, Harry Smith here. We have just a few seconds left. I'm a little bit curious as to how you think Saddam Hussein may respond now. People have been somewhat surprised at the minimal resistance to the initial wave of attacks. Do you think he might have a lot left in his reservoir to fight back?
I cannot tell you. I don't know what he's thinking. I think it's he might be completely imbalanced in his judgments. He might believe that he could repeat the Nasser experience in 56 and 67. That is to turn a defeat into a victory. But I really don't know what is going through his mind. I do know that although we cannot say exactly how long this military engagement will take, I can say that the beginning is very auspicious, and I have no doubt about the end. It will be a decisive defeat of Saddam Hussein. It's the middle part that we still have to worry about.
Benjamin Netanyahu reporting joining us this morning from Israel. We do appreciate it.
Operation Desert Storm is now into its 13th hour, and here are the latest headlines for you. 2 waves of Allied air attacks have dropped many tons of bombs on Kuwait and Iraq. The Pentagon dismisses an Iraqi claim. The 14 Allied planes were shot down, but 1 is missing. President Bush will breakfast with top security advisors at the White House. And Saddam Hussein apparently survives the night, defiant as ever. Baghdad radio reports that Hussein toured the streets of the Iraqi capital this morning. Earlier, Hussein vowed to fight the Allied invasion and win. U.S. fighters and bombers returned to their bases after intense bombing raids, one held at night, the other 7 hours later during daylight. And some U.S. pilots say Iraqi jets ran from them rather than fight. 1 British jet is reported missing, but there are reports the crew bailed out safely somewhere in the Gulf. Also, 1 Saudi oil refinery is said to have been hard hit by the Iraqi artillery. But world economic markets are reacting upward on word the war is going well for the Allies. In London, oil dropped $6 a barrel shortly after Thursday trading began. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Colin Powell will brief reporters at 9 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, and we, of course, will be bringing that briefing to you live.
We're talking a little bit about money and the reaction of markets around the world to the bombing of Baghdad last night and the war that has started. Robert Krulwich joins us this morning to talk a little bit about costs. Robert, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. For some time now, we have had troops in the Gulf at tremendous expense. We've had the equipment there, we've had our ammunition there, we've had spare parts there, we've had fuel there. And yet now that this war has started, the cost of the war will jump from $66 million a day to $1 billion a day, or so says Lawrence Korb of the Brookings Institution in Washington. And talking yesterday with logistics and procurement experts, they agree, and $1 billion a day is at least 4 times the daily cost of the war in Vietnam. I wondered what exactly is it that makes fighting so expensive. And here is what I found out. First is equipment. Some of these tanks, some of these jets, and some of these helicopters are going to be lost in battle. And because these weapons now carry highly sophisticated electronic systems, losing them costs more than in Vietnam. Each of these Apache helicopters, for example, costs $12 million. The newer naval jet fighters run up to $50 million each. These marine landing craft, which use water propulsion, that's water vapor you see spraying off on top there, cost about $750,000, and they will drive, presumably, right into hostile fire. So if destroyed equipment is one big cost, the next is ammunition. This 20-millimeter phalanx on the USS Wisconsin fires 3,000 shells a minute. At $10 to $12 for each shell, every minute of fire there costs $36,000. This naval gun fires more slowly, but every round, and you see the shells dropping there on the deck, each shot costs taxpayers $1,250 for each and every shot. And every blast from this 16-inch gun costs $10,000. Bombs come in standard sizes. These 750-pounders cost about $4,000 apiece. But a single B-52 bomber can drop so many bombs that the cost of one raid can run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Missiles are also expensive. This is a tow missile. That's $15,000. This missile, being very quickly fitted onto this F-15, is the Sidewinder. It costs $65,000. Other missiles cost more than $1 million. And to be on the receiving end of a missile also costs money. The USS Stark was hit in 1987 in the Gulf. The cost of repairing the hull and the fire damage, $83 million. So you have those repair costs, plus the loss of equipment, plus using spare parts up, plus the use of expensive ammunition, and then you add to that higher fuel costs, because now that the war has started, equipment of all kinds is on the move more hours every day. The M1 tank, for example, gets gas mileage of only 1/6 of a mile per gallon, and that is why Petroleum Intelligence Weekly is now predicting that fuel consumption will jump today from 200,000 barrels before the conflict to 400 or even 600 barrels today, which works out to an additional cost of as much as $10 million per day. Now, there is no way to come up with anything close to a precise figure here, but given the need that we have to concentrate firepower early in the conflict to protect our troops on the ground, we are well, it seems, on our way to $1 billion a day.
And does that figure reflect the intensity of the fight?
You would not expect a figure like that to last over a period of more than a week or two, and then it would begin to go down.
All right, Robert, thank you very much.
We have been getting some conflicting information all morning long on casualties. The BBC going with a report early on this morning to describe the casualties as remarkably low. Now we have the British Defense Secretary, Tom King, reporting that one British Tornado and crew is missing. There is a report that they may have ejected somewhere over the Gulf. Right now we're going to go to Richard Threlkeld, who is standing by in London, where he is watching the British effort unfold there. Good morning, Richard.
That's right, Paula. Tom King did, in fact, say that the British Tornado fighter bomber turned up missing on the second wave of bombing runs today as a result of an engine fire. It's unclear whether it was from ground fire or simply a malfunction, but that two-man crew is missing. Nonetheless, the British warplanes are giving a very good account of themselves. Most of the warplanes bombing Iraqi positions today have been American, but some of the most effective sorties have been flown by these British Tornado fighter bombers, shown here in low-level exercises over the Saudi desert landscape recently. They're armed with what's called a runway denial weapon, a bomb cluster that tears up enemy runways, making them unusable, helping to keep Iraq's warplanes on the ground where they're easily destroyed. And apparently, if the first British pilots back from their bomb runs today are correct, those weapons of theirs are working.
It's well planned. You know, we achieved, well, we're going to have to wait and see what we achieve, but, you know, from what we saw, looked good.
And as you mentioned, some of the damage inflicted on Allied aircraft may very well be the result of a peculiar tactic that Iraqi forces learned in their fight against Iran in the 80s. That is, in anti-aircraft tactics, they simply line up a group of soldiers and they all fire their automatic weapons at once in one direction so that fighter has to go through a curtain of small arms fire. It was a tactic that worked quite well during the Vietnam War when practiced by the North Vietnamese.
Very quickly in closing, Richard, the surprising thing this morning seems to be the lack of the resistance the Iraqis showed. The British reaction to that?
Well, I think it's not only the British reaction, all of the Allied reaction, which is one of great caution. There's a lot of power out there. There's a lot of firepower left over on the Iraqi side, and it's too soon to say that it's not going to be used.
Richard Threlkeld from London, thank you. CBS News coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues.
Channel 10 News continues special coverage of the war in the Gulf, the Delaware Valley Connection.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Blunt with the latest on just how the war in the Persian Gulf is affecting lives right here in the Delaware Valley. To recap some of the latest happenings in the Persian Gulf this morning, the second attack by Allied forces is still underway. The second military mission started around midnight last night. There are reports that in the second attack, 14 Allied aircraft have been shot down. Iraqi radio is the source of that report. The Pentagon is saying the report is, quote, ridiculous. Also, there is confirmation from Saudi Arabia that an oil refinery on the eastern coast of the kingdom has been hit. No other details are being released at this time. Up to and including yesterday when war was started, Fort Dix and McGuire Air Force bases in New Jersey have been hotbeds of activity related to Operation Desert Shield, now being called Operation Desert Storm. Dave Schrappweiser has more.
They cheered President Bush last night at Kelly's Bar near McGuire Air Force Base and Fort Dix. Airmen and soldiers in uniform and plain clothes intently watched the president on a big screen TV. And after it was over, they said they supported the invasion of Iraq.
I think the president, as far as I'm concerned, made the right choices, and I'm behind him 100%, all the way.
The president is the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. Whatever he sees and feels, I back him 100%. And I'll tell you what, tonight with Saddam Hussein, I back him 1,001%.
Meanwhile, state troopers stood guard outside McGuire Air Force Base. Inside, security forces were on full alert. Hundreds of airmen from McGuire are at a major air base in Saudi Arabia, which reportedly took part in the initial attack. We visited that base last month. Many of the airmen said they were ready to go to war if the call came.
Well, we're here to do what we got to do and get on out of here.
That was Channel 10's Dave Schrappweiser reporting from Fort Dix. Along with the outbreak of war in the Persian Gulf comes even louder cries for peace here at home. Arthur Fennell has more.
I've had one phone call to the Pentagon, and they will not give out any information except that we are well into our operation, not just in Baghdad, but also in the entire theater around Kuwait. We don't know what the casualties are, if there are any.
Our thoughts and our prayers, Larry, are with our young people over there in Saudi Arabia, and we're hoping that the conflict will be over swiftly, decisively, and they will come back unharmed. And our prayers are with not only them, but their families, not only in Delaware Valley, but across the country.
Were you surprised at the swiftness of the attack?
No. Many of us thought that once the president got the authority, he was going to use it.
That was Channel 10 anchorman Larry Kane talking to Congressman Bill Gray. Americans at war in the Gulf mean there are anxious families still here at home. Jane Robelo has a report on one family.
As of 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Operation Desert Storm forces were engaging targets in Kuwait and Iraq.
There was a calm silence at Eileen Olson's home as CBS reported that Operation Desert Storm had begun.
It's really scary now. You knew the time was going to come, but you just are still shocked that they're bombing now.
Joe Olson is 22 years old. He's Eileen's only son, and he's with the 101st Airborne in Saudi Arabia. Ironically, Eileen received a taped message from her son on the very day that war began.
Hi, man. It's New Year's Eve, and it's
daughters, Eileen and Kathleen, are ever close, as her granddaughters, Shannon and Kristen. Family is support.
They know what's going on, and they're scared, just like anybody else would be.
Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
The Olsen family listens carefully to the president, believing with Joe that the commander-in-chief is making the right decision.
That was Jane Robolo reporting. Right now, people are beginning to make their way to work here in the Delaware Valley, and of course, the war in the Mideast is on everyone's minds. Channel 10's Dennis Waldering is at City Hall right now. Dennis, what is the mood of the public today?
Well, John, a lot of people coming into Center City to work this morning looked bleary-eyed. Some people said they were up much of the night watching television coverage of the war. And Heather Gable of Westchester said it was unsettling to see.
Frightening. I just hope everyone comes home safe and sound.
Were you surprised to hear that we...
No,
okay.
Not at all. Something that it was inevitable that was going to happen.
People coming into work were snapping up newspapers with the dramatic headlines screaming "War in Gulf." Some, like Herbert Bagwell, questioning why the war is necessary.
I don't really know, and
you have a hard time comprehending what's going on.
I really don't understand. I really don't understand myself.
But others emphasize they support the attack. One man, Homer Green of North Philadelphia, said his little brother is in Saudi Arabia right now, fighting for the United States. He says his brother was home a month or so ago, and he knew this could be a life-or-death situation, but he and his family support what's going on. John?
Thank you for that. Dennis Waldering reporting live from Center City. Again, to recap the headlines from the Gulf, the second Allied attack against Iraq is now underway. It started around midnight last night, Eastern Time. There are no reports about casualties, but the Pentagon is expected to give a briefing sometime this morning, believably around 9 a.m. this morning. Now, early indications are the attacks by the Allied force has been a devastating one against Iraqi military installations. Now, with the check of the weather for Philadelphia and vicinity, the forecast variable cloudiness and windy today. Winds gusting 15 to 25 miles an hour. The high today around 47 degrees. Tonight and Friday, partly cloudy skies, the low around 30 degrees. The high tomorrow around 42. Currently in Philadelphia, your temperature is 43 degrees, and the extended forecast fair on Saturday, a chance of rain or snow on Sunday, fair and much cooler on Monday. That's the Channel 10 news at this hour. Let's rejoin the CBS network for the latest on Operation Desert Storm, war in the Persian Gulf.
This has been a Channel 10 News special report on war in the Gulf. Stay with us for continuing coverage and reaction in the Delaware Valley.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to our special edition of CBS This Morning. I'm Paula Zahn.
And I'm Harry Smith, our continuing coverage of the war in the Gulf. Well, I guess we've got the headlines this morning.
For those of you just joining us, here are the headlines. 2 massive air assaults launch Operation Desert Storm. The Pentagon says 1 U.S. plane was shot down, and the British also report one of their planes missing. The Pentagon plans a briefing in Saudi Arabia in just a couple of minutes, and we will be covering that live. Operation Desert Storm began last night about 7 o'clock Eastern Time with a bombing raid on Baghdad and other targets in Iraq and Kuwait. It continued into the daylight hours with another wave of attacks. This morning, the Pentagon says 1 U.S. warplane was shot down. Among the targets hit, Iraq's Ministry of Defense. U.S. pilots returning from their missions had this to say about their raids.
Well, yeah, it's late. I'm tired. I owe my crowd here a breakfast. They told me I'm supposed to buy breakfast, so that's coming up next. And then it's right back into work, and we'll do it one more time.
And right now we go to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where Colonel Mike Scott is standing by with that military briefing. Let's listen in right now. Apparently, we are awaiting the arrival of Colonel Mike Scott.
It's an F-16 pilot. This is a briefing room in Saudi Arabia, a location that we don't know right now. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Scott is the officer that we're going to be hearing from.
There are a lot of questions that are being asked this morning, and the information is coming in very slowly, as you might expect under the circumstances.
Apparently, the officer is going to give a statement. I'm not sure we're going to get any questions and answers this morning, but
I think while we're waiting, we should probably make...
Individuals who will be up here at the podium will be Air Force Lieutenant Colonel...
We should make it clear, the Pentagon is now calling the Iraqi claims that 14 Allied planes have been shot down an exaggeration. That is a report we heard very early on this morning. The Pentagon, just about an hour ago, denying that report.
From the different Allied forces, what we have heard so far is the British have said that one of their planes was shot down, but the pilots and his co-pilot managed to bail out. We don't know their status as of this moment.
The French saying 4 of their 12 aircraft involved in some of the 2 initial waves of bombings were hit. One of the pilots injured, but the 4 planes apparently returned safely to their bases.
And Senator Sam Nunn this morning, with authorization from Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, did say this morning that there was 1 U.S. plane shot down. We don't have any amplification on that information or details as to the pilot.
Earlier this morning, the president paid a surprise visit to the White House briefing room where he told Wyatt Andrews he was pleased with how things are going. Right now, we're going to go to Steve Croft as we're waiting for this briefing to start for an update from that end of the newsroom. Good morning again, Steve, and you're joined by David Aaron again?
That's right, Paula. I'm here with David Aaron, former Deputy National Security Advisor in the Carter administration. David, it would seem right now that things have gone pretty much the way the United States wanted it to go, pretty much the way we expected it would happen, massive air attacks. Do you think it's too early to say we've established air superiority?
I think we must be very close to it. I think the president's got to feel very satisfied as he looks at the reports this morning that we seem to be able to fly over Baghdad with impunity. The Iraqis have been totally unable to mount any kind of a counter either in the air or on an offensive basis to reach out and strike oil fields, our naval forces, or any of our air bases. So I think that he has to feel that the initial military objectives have been met, and I think he has to feel very good that the initial political objectives have been met. After all, he has now presented, almost 18 hours into this struggle, that we have struck the first blow, that we have done so cleanly and effectively, and that has to give great encouragement to the coalition that has been standing up to Saddam Hussein.
What kind of an option do you think that the Iraqi military has right now? Have they been there's almost no resistance. We've been talking about it for several hours now. Do you think they have anything left, and what would you expect them to do with what they do have left?
Well, I think that their ability to do any long-range offensive kinds of operations, that is, coming across the border here with their aircraft, trying to strike any of the airfields, trying to strike ships in the Persian Gulf, trying to reach out and fulfill the threat to attack Israel, I think those options are rapidly disappearing. What they do have, of course, is the ability to hang tough inside Kuwait itself. And once air superiority is in fact established, I think we're going to start seeing the B-52s coming in and starting to root out those forces. And I think there's a real possibility that the ground operations could happen much earlier than a lot of people have been talking about.
Mm-hmm. At the moment right now, the Pentagon is reporting that there's been no involvement of U.S. ground forces. Many of the almost 400,000 troops that are in the Gulf were told this morning about the airstrikes, and here are some of what the men and women of the 82nd Airborne had to say after hearing the news.
I was really excited that something's going on. In a way, I was scared, though, because there was a possibility that we're going to die. Nobody really wants to die.
How old are you?
I'm 19.
I thought it was outstanding. I even went outside, listened to the planes. I thought it was a good message for Mr. Saddam. And I went and woke up all my men and let them know what was going on. and everybody woke up and gave me a hooah, and that was outstanding to hear. I thought it was real exciting.
So you think it was a morale boost?
No, I don't think it was a morale boost. I know it was a morale boost.
It's about time. We're glad.
Why?
Well, we've been sitting here for 5 months just waiting around, and it's nice to know something's happening because that just means we're closer to going home.
Are you worried at all about it?
Well, I'd be stupid if I wasn't worried. I don't want to die, but we're here to do it. We'll do it good because we know what's going on.
Harry, Paula?
Steve Croft, thank you very, very much. Here to discuss the first half day of this war is former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Thank you for coming by to join us. Your reactions to thus far to what we've seen and heard over the last dozen hours or so.
Well, first of all, I think the president made the right and courageous decision to do what he did, because if this had ended with the military capacity of Iraq remaining, ours leaving, which was the essence of all the various proposals, Iraq would have wound up as the dominant and blackmailing country of the area. So now there's a chance, after this is over, to develop peaceful solutions to a number of problems. I think it's gone well. The emphasis has been on air power. I believe that there's a chance that the Iraqi forces in Kuwait may surrender.